Hello, guys. This is Christina Barr from Black Tea News, and we're trying not to be before you long here on tonight because I have church and other things to get to tonight. But I wanted to talk about Pastor Raphael Warnock and some of the comments he's been making. He's the candidate who's running for the Georgia election in the runoff, and his opponents have been digging into some old uh, messages, and he's saying that they're taking him out of context with some things, and it's kind of some funny reactions to some of this too. But I don't know how much they vetted this guy, but he just kind of seems like a typical leftist, but except he gets to be on a pulpit and says some things. So, and I also want to talk about some reactions I'm seeing, and I had a conversation with my sister the other day, how she sees that there's some Black pastors who I don't know if they sway toward like liberation. Hey, Bobby, good to see you on there. If they sway toward critical race theory or not, but some of them have attitude of they're annoyed or I guess frustrated with white evangelicals because they are of the opinion that they only care about abortion, which I don't feel that is true at all. And so when my sister mentioned this, I pushed back and I gave this example. Like there's this one charity that it just was reported that HBO Max and Melissa McCarthy, they they apologized for giving like $20,000 or something to this charity because I guess they got pushback and they said this is an anti-abortion charity, so they apologized for supporting it. But this charity is one that helps women who have been sex trafficked. So yes, it's an anti-abortion charity, I suppose, because it's a Christian organization. But when you so they allege that people who are not for abortion are just pro-birth and they don't want to help people and they don't want to reach out to them to help with other situations, and they only care about them when they're fresh out the womb, and they don't care about them later. And then you got a charity, for example, like this that says, hey, we're going to help women when they go through something that is horrific and terrible and try to get them back on their feet and so on. And they're saying it's not good enough that you do this wonderful thing because you don't like the thing that we want you to like. So it's really submit or die with a lot of these people. And so that's really the case with these people who are so, it's almost like they worship this thing, and they love it so much that even if you do some other good deed, they don't like you. For example, you got like the Samaritan's Purse, when they started setting up tents and stuff to help people with COVID when it first started breaking out in New York and stuff. They were like, you got to get out of here when it wasn't like to the max and it started to calm down a bit. They're like, thanks for your good work, but you have to go because you're a Christian organization and we don't like the things that you preach and we don't like the things that you push. So this is another example. If you don't submit to their will, then they just don't like you at all. So I think what people who are pro-life or conservatives or Christians, when other people make that case, like you guys are just pro-birth and you don't care, like push back on that, please. Don't, because this is a narrative that really people have been pushing hard in this past year, and that they want to keep going and moving forward and make it bigger and bigger. But if we don't push back on this false narrative, then it's just going to keep becoming a monstrous thing. So some people are saying I'm freezing up. I don't know what to do. If that's the case, I'm gonna keep talking and see if that helps. So anyway, with some of the comments that Raphael said, they pointed out there's a headline that U.S. must repent for its worship of whiteness. And in this sermon, now the tip, he responded and said that this sermon specifically was during 2016 after candidate Trump said some particular comments. And so people responding to particular comments that he made in the past is totally acceptable. I accept that. But him and other people, which we really saw in 2016 election night with like Van Jones and other people, they just said we experienced a white lash, and they had this false assumption that a lot of people supported President Trump out of racism. And then some people like Chris Matthews, who is no longer on air, seems like they pushed him off abruptly. He pointed out that I don't think these people voted for Donald Trump because they're racist. And people pointing out that a lot of people who voted for Obama also voted for Trump. And so a lot of people really don't want to dig deeper into the issues. Like, you might not like either. You might not like Trump or Hillary in 2016. And I don't care what you say, how much you like the man. It was a gamble either way. He exceeded a lot of people's expectations. Like, when I went to a rally, that's what a lot of people told me, that he really exceeded people's expectations. Even if they supported him from the jump, and some people were leery. But it was a gamble. But at the time, let's say your issue was you didn't want to get involved in more wars, and you'd have someone who, was pro Iraq war versus someone who wasn't in office but always talked against it. And Hillary Clinton, she was a part of Obama's administration. And when Obama ran, everybody was really sick of war. And Obama was like, we're going to, end this stuff. We're going to pull out. And, but when he got in office, we went from 2 wars, and then all of a sudden we were in like 5 wars, and we had regime changes and other things that happened. So, and Hillary Clinton, that laughing video she did with Gaddafi after he died, he died or something. I mean, that rubbed some people the wrong way. So people who were in that generation, I thought we were going to get out of war, because people were like so sick of it. Like, when Bush got reelected, he got, he pretty much took that very clearly and stuff. And you had like we're going to do this. This is for, we're stopping being preventative with stopping terror and all this other stuff. By the time he ended his term, people were like, no, we're sick of war. But then we kept going and expanding. So if you were an anti-war person, doesn't it make sense that you would maybe take the risk with Trump? So that's just an example of an issue where someone might be focused on something along those lines, and it's got nothing to do with any kind of racism or anything. And then people also remember that people like Trump prior to 2015, when he announced that he was going to run, and he was popular and he was putting in all the music videos and so on. So people who still push this propaganda, trying to slander him, but slander all the supporters who support him for various reasons. And I heard some crazy reasons why people voted for the president. Like, there's one guy I used to work with, and he was like pretty much a Marxist, I would think, kind of got me, this guy. And I was just so sure he was a Bernie person. And I would have never guessed in a million years he voted for Trump. And then I saw him, he's like, I voted for Trump. I was like, what? And his opinion was just that the whole system kind of needed to be overturned and run down. Like, I don't know if he kind of felt like it'd be like Adventure Time, and there'd be like a nuclear holocaust, and we would emerge as candy people. I don't know what he expected, because my perspective on Trump wasn't his perspective on Trump, but he just thought it was like a necessary chaos. And so he voted for Trump. So you don't know what all kind of reasons people went ahead and voted for Trump, but people had different reasons, and it wasn't out of racism. And people who claimed that it was really a huge disservice. So and also some other things that he said. He mentioned also like the mocking people who are disabled. That was a big hoax. They pushed that everywhere in 2016. So I can't really blame people for being tricked by that. But the reporter that he got into scrap with, I suppose, he quoted something from an article that he wrote, and then the reporter kind of like, I don't know, backed away from him a bit. So Trump was mocking him when he's like, oh, I don't know what I said. And so he made this kind of like flailing kind of movements, which he does when he regularly talks about people sometimes. So there's other examples. I think he talked about Ted Cruz another way, kind of like that, and then some other people. And actually this particular manipulation is what radicalized, I suppose you could say, Brandon Strzok from the walkaway movement, because he mentioned something about Trump, I think online, about him mocking a disabled person, and someone commented and said, hey, I don't want to start any drama with you, but just so you know, this is what happened. So she kind of sent him like the video evidence of him, like how it, because they would slow it down too, as if he was like making fun of someone who's like mentally retarded. And so he saw like the real thing and then compared it to like other videos that he would do. And then he saw that he had been manipulated by the media, and it freaked him out. And he kind of didn't believe it at first. And then he kept watching it. And then he kind of did a deep dive. He'd come home from work and he'd like just research about a bunch of stuff. So he talked about, I'm sure he's talked about this a bunch of other times, but he went really into it when he was on Tim Pool's podcast. So a lot of people were manipulated in that kind of way, but I don't think Mr. Warnock, Pastor Warnock, really did any kind of reflection after the fact. People also got on him because of they found out his church welcomed Fidel Castro. And granted, at the time he was a young youth pastor, so he would not have had any I suppose any say in that. And when they talked to him about this on CNN, they're like, you don't support him, do you? And he's sort of, not really sort of, he dodged that and kind of went to prepared talking remarks. So that was interesting how he just kind of dodged it a bit. But the whole like critical race theory and the whole Black liberation theology, it doesn't bode well. And I do want to say to the people, it's not just people who are behind this particular ideology that believe and have issues with a lot of like white evangelicals because they don't agree on like political issues. It's leaking and seeping into more mainstream, like bigger names and stuff. So like I would encourage everybody to really push back on this stuff. And another thing that Warnock said in his sermon was taught, like they allege that, if you don't believe in raising minimum wage like $15 an hour that is somehow immoral. And Pete Buttigieg said the same thing on a debate stage and like twisted a scripture to make this point. But honestly, though, I've talked to people who believe that everybody should get $15 an hour. And first of all, it's like, we should talk about raising them at federal minimum wage. And I look at the federal minimum wage. I'm just like, who is paying that little? Because everybody is so desperate to have people to work that no one is really paying that low of a cost. You can go work at Taco Bell for $13, $14 like right now around the corner for me. I'm not even joking, because people need people to work so bad. And even before, like, people were kind of begging to come work during this pandemic stuff, the economy was just doing so well before all this corona stuff broke out that people were just like raising wages naturally because they needed people to work. I even saw like a sign at the dollar store was like, we can't find enough people to work right now, so we're very sorry, we are closed. We'll try not to let this happen again. And smaller stores like that, it's really hard to pay someone like $15 an hour. But I would talk to people and say, what if a business cannot pay $15 an hour? And do you know what people will say to me in response? People who I'm sure don't employ other people, they will tell me, if a small business cannot afford people who to pay people $15 an hour, then they should close down. They are not a good business and they should close down. And I don't know how you can have that kind of perspective, especially someone who doesn't employ other people. Like, if it's that easy to pay people $15 an hour, why don't you quit your job, start a business, pay yourself $15 an hour and everyone you know? Because it's not that easy. You didn't assume the risk, build it from ground up, and do all the paperwork and do it all the sweat, tears, blood, everything that goes into starting a business to get it to where it is. And to tell someone maybe they can't pay 15, but they pay 12 or 11.50 or something like that, which wasn't too far off that long ago. Everyone's paying, at least around me, more than that right now. But to say that they don't deserve to be in business, that's really insane. So, and then like people talk about Christians pushing their morality into like politics and their religious views, but I'm just like, where do some of these other people who aren't religious or who get these views about what is moral? Like I just explained how $15 an hour could kill a small business because they can't afford to do it. And some of them have the attitude of, good, they shouldn't exist. Like, where do you get that sense of moral virtue that you get to just decide that for someone else, that if they can't get you what you want, then they should just be totally destroyed. Where do you get that sense of virtue? You think someone, like, because it's the moral thing to do. It's like, what about a kid who's just like starting out and for their first summer job, like you have to run somebody else out of business because you think they deserve a living wage? Like, people would sail across the ocean for a chance at a better life, or trek the terrain of the United States before there were cars and trains and so on, to try to get land and make something of themselves. And like real life Oregon Trail, which I've never been able to meet, and I don't know anyone personally that has. Um, maybe you have out there. Um, that people had to do great risk. Like, it sucks if you have to work 2 jobs or 3 jobs or something, but it's not immoral that you have to get things done. So there's this, I know it sounds good, to the living wage and the 15, but it's not practical. So people like using, twisting scriptures to kind of base this kind of different morality, and to say this is the thing that you have to do or you're somehow immoral. Like, compassion isn't right if it doesn't work, especially at the expense of a business owner. So yeah, so sometimes your policy is just bad policy, and it's not that people disagree or don't like you because of your color, their skin color. It's just that we don't agree on the issues. And I'm starting to see, like, my sister was at work today, and she saw someone coming with a shirt that said "Skin folk ain't kinfolk," and she's just kind of like, wow, someone like blatantly just displaying their racism proudly now. And if you don't agree with their kind of worldview and their political views about how they believe that the community and everything is supposed to be better, then you're somehow not really black. Like, your skin may be black, but you're not really a black person. And how did we get to this place? And why are we at this place? And why is it you who gets to decide that? Maybe your policies don't work. Maybe they're just bad, but we can have a conversation. But you don't get to just say that I'm not a real kind of black person because you believe one way and I believe another. Let's just have a discussion, and we can disagree. But back to this whole thing about the whole, I don't know, war on white evangelicals, I suppose, because they don't because they say they're only for abortion, and they don't care about police brutality, or they don't care about the income gap, or they don't care about reducing poverty. I think everyone who's anti-abortion cares about all of those things. Like, the people who I know who are the most productive as far as like police oversight and brutality and all the other stuff are libertarian leaning Republicans. And I tell people this all the time. And when I would get frustrated with people talking about Black Lives Matter, I would tell them, look, if you want to talk to some people who are productive and not are just going to take your money and funnel it into other Democrats so they can do whatever, I'm like, Black Lives Matter is not a good organization. And they would tell me, like, who should I support? And I'm like, I don't have an easy answer for you. I'm like, you can support a black business, you can look into local groups and stuff, but what you really need to do is get involved. And when I first started getting involved, it was the libertarian leaning Republicans that were like, the very first meeting I went to, they were talking about some of the things that they didn't like, some of the equipment that the local police was having, and they thought they were becoming too militarized. And I was just kind of like stunned at this position. Because I'm just like, when I need the police, I just want them to call and show up, and that's all I need, and that's all that I want. And but they were involved in all these other concerns. And so if you want to get serious, I would talk to people like that. And I do have to start to wrap this up, but so just because people don't see things exactly your way, or doesn't mean that you can just boot them out and assume so much of them and about their priorities. They do care about people having jobs. our unemployment was really, really low before, COVID happened. And when everyone is doing well, everyone, Black people, Hispanic people, that's good for America. That's good for all people. So, um, and other people talk about systemic racism. The most obvious example of systemic racism is Planned Parenthood, because it was started in eugenics, and it was started to limit the population of minorities and the poor. And they would even go and they'd pay pastors to advocate for the sort of things that they would want. And so they know that they can manipulate people through the Black church, through the pulpit. That's an easy way to manipulate people into their really bad, destructive policies. People like Pastor Warnock, who is proudly pro-choice. and and so with systemic racism, they can say, hey, even if people there right now today don't have racist intentions, if it's still disproportionate and was rooted in racism, then it's still systemic. So with Planned Parenthood, it does disproportionately hurt Black and brown communities the most. So because that's where they're stationed and that's who their top clients are. So if you want to talk about systemic racism, it is the best example there is right now in the country. So when people talk about trying to get rid of it, that's the main example. So people like Pastor Warnock, who's proudly pro-choice, and he said this tweet, and I'm not going to find it right now, so I'm just going to paraphrase it. But he said he thinks that a hospital room is too small for the government and your doctor and the woman. And so that's his like cute little, that's why I'm against abortion, as if it's like a small, lower, like limited government position. But people who say that, don't you guys support Obamacare? And Obamacare was started with the mandate that you had to get it, or we're going to fine you. And if you can't afford it, I guess you have until next year to figure it out, because we're going to fine you again more until you finally get some health care, which the president thankfully got rid of that mandate, but they needed the mandate to work. And even the architect of Obamacare said if people would have known what they were voting for or what it was, then it would have never passed. And he said, call it the stupidity of Americans. But they benefited from not giving out real information about it. So there, and then he says he's pro-choice, but we know that people pro-choice about what? Because you guys don't believe that we should have choices with our healthcare, because a lot of these people do want to transition from not even having private insurance, and they want everybody to have like Medicare for all. And these people don't like school choice. Where they believe that money should follow the child, and children should be able to go to charter schools or private school, wherever, instead of just pouring money into maybe school. Like I graduated from a good public school. I started off in a not great public school. I understand the difference a good education can make and where you go to school. So that's why I support school choice. And there are great public schools, but there are some that are not. And I know that money itself does not just solve issues. So I think I really do have to go. So anyway, push back on this narrative with people that if you don't agree with them on their policies, then you somehow don't care, or you only care about certain things. Because a lot of people who are pro-life, everyone I know who has adopted a child in real life, like in my immediate circle, or not immediate, but just everyone that I personally know is a pro-life person and is a Christian. So, and I'm not saying that all people who do are, but that's my personal experience. I know that's anecdotal, but push back on this narrative, because we can't afford to really let it keep going and spreading. And then next time in 2 years when there's election, we have to beat it back so hard. Work on doing that now. But if you enjoyed this podcast, please go to blacktnews.com and you can buy products like a couple other things. We'll have some more things as well. And on the back, it has a list of like a bunch of racist stuff that he said and did. Like, it'll be great when you want to have a conversation with people, because I'm sure it'll it'll spark one. And also, you feel free to please donate if you want to help spread the word what we're doing, and help us to grow. You can go ahead and support this. So thank you guys for listening. God bless you. I gotta get to church. God bless you.